Hello, this is Mighty Owl. Some people say that money makes the world go round. I say money makes fractions and decimals easier to understand. Dimes and pennies are a great way to relate to tenths and hundredths. 3 dimes, or 30 cents, can be written as 0.3. This decimal can be read as 3 tenths. And when we think about dollars, 10 dimes are needed to make a whole dollar, so each dime is a tenth of a dollar. 30 cents or 3 dimes is 3 tenths of a dollar. Ha, look at that! Both the decimal version and the fraction version are read the same as 3 tenths. And 2 pennies, or 2 cents, can be written as a decimal, 0.02. We can also read this decimal as 2 hundredths. 100 pennies makes a dollar, so 2 pennies is 2 hundredths of a dollar. How neat! The same thing happened. The decimal and the fraction are read the same way. Now, when we look at the place value of decimals, this all makes sense. You're already familiar with the place values on the left of the decimal, the ones place, tens place, hundreds, and so on. The first place value to the right of the decimal point is the tenths place. And the next place is the hundredths place, and so on. So 0.3 has a 3 in the tenths place and is read as 3 tenths. 0.05 has a 5 in the hundredths place, and so it's read as 5 hundredths. All right, juggling between fractions and decimals is fun. Now let's move on to some practice problems. We're going to be converting decimals into fractions. All right, here's the first one. Part A has a 5 in the tenths place, and so it's read as 5 tenths. Well, we can write the fraction 5 tenths by having a 5 as the numerator and a 10 as the denominator. Perfect. Part B has a 4 in the hundredths place, and therefore can be read as 4 hundredths. To write this as a fraction, we have a 4 as the numerator and a 100 as the denominator. All right, moving on to part C. This has a number in both the tenth and the hundredth place. Don't worry, when we read this number, we say the number 13 followed by the smallest place value, hundredths in this case. So 13 hundredths. And we can write that as a fraction by having a 13 as the numerator and 100 as the denominator. And finally, part D. Now we have a number to the left of the decimal in this one. Remember, this is the ones place. So the 3 represents 3 wholes, and we're going to write this to the left of the fraction. Next, we have 47 hundredths. And just like what we did in part C, we're going to create a fraction with the numerator of 47 and a denominator of 100. Perfect. Now let's try it the other way around. Okay, we're going to be converting fractions into decimals now. Starting with A, the fraction is 8 tenths. Tenths is the very first place value to the right of the decimal, and this means we can put an 8 there. Perfect. 0.8 is read as 8 tenths. Awesome! Moving on to the next part, B. Okay, here we've got 19 hundredths. Well, we know that the second place to the right of the decimal is the hundredths place, so the 9 represents the smaller place value and therefore goes in the hundredths place. The one for the 19 will go in the tenths place, and perfect! 0.19 is read as 19 hundredths. And the last one for this problem, part C. Oh, we have a mixed number here. Well, let's start with the whole number, 2. Since this is a whole number, it'll be written just to the left of the decimal in the ones place. And next we move on to the fraction, 26 hundredths. Just like with the previous part, we have 2 numbers that will need to end with the hundredths place. The 6 will be in the hundredths place, and the 2 will be in the tenths place. 2.26 is read as 2 and 26 hundredths. There we go. Now moving on, here comes the third problem. All right, last problem. Determine the following value and write it as a fraction and decimal. Well, let's start with finding the value and writing it as a fraction. Looks like there are 10 rows of 10, so a total of 100 squares. And out of those 100 squares, 3 full rows of 10 and a partial row of 8 are shaded. So there are 38 shaded squares out of 100. Okay, this fraction has a 38 as the numerator and 100 as the denominator. 38 hundredths. And we know now how to write that fraction as a decimal too. The 8 goes into the hundredths place, 2 places over from the decimal, and the 3 goes in the tenths place, 1 place to the right of the decimal. Ah, perfect. We have now written 38 hundredths as a fraction and a decimal. Whoa, that's the whole lesson? Time flies when you're having fun. Let's sum up what we learned today. We learned how to write fractions as decimals and how to write decimals as fractions using place values. That's mighty cool. And I'll see you in the next video lesson.